We got a little headband, belt, a hat, more of these bracelets, homemade sticker. Like I said, the gingerbread and belt are only here because I only have a little bit left. Then I have this. It's kind of like a black and white theme box. Then we have this. Then we have black and white heart. My gloves are not working anymore. Let's see if I can find like a dark one. And I may or may not add a drawing. We will see. Depends on if people want drawings. And a bracelet. And a miniature 3D. Now if you want something bigger, you can pay for the bigger piece. Wrong way. Ready to go. Blue hat and a green hat. An adorable little bell. 2 of these bracelets. 3D miniature project. Keychain. Gingerbread man. Let's get one out of here. A leaf, just some more pendants, and ta-da, already packaged, ready to go. Blue hat and a green hat. An adorable little bell. 2 of these bracelets. 3D miniature project. Keychain. Gingerbread man. Let's get one out of here. A leaf, just some more pendants, and ta-da, already packaged, ready to go. We also have little pendants that are a little kitty cat, a little random one, and a U one, and a leaf, and a handmade hat. And I may add a drawing. We will see. Then we close it all up. And we're ready to go. Today we're going to be talking about where is Angela Green. On Valentine's Day 2020, Eli Green drove from Lawrence to Topeka to get a copy of her mother Angela Green's death certificate. It was chilly, overcast day, just a few weeks before pandemic shut down, when Ellie pulled out to the office of Vitral Statistics inside a 5-story connected building across from the state capitol. Based on the story she's been told by her father, Jeff Green, Ellie accepted the death to be recorded sometime the previous summer. Angela died from a stroke. Jeff said, though he refused to answer any questions about where and when she died, and asked his daughter to keep her mother's death secret from Angela's family. Ellie typed her information into a kiosk and waited her turn. Then she waited some more. After an hour, one of the clerks came back to her with a record of her mother's marriage. There was no record of Angela's death. I noticed something was wrong, Ellie said. When I found out there wasn't a death certificate in Pidelico, I knew I was in for a very long run. 2 years later, Ellie Green is still looking for answers. With the help of her mother's side of the family, she recorded phone calls with her father, hired private investigators, had solid samples from family property tested by a lab, and sat down for interviews with Dr. Phil and podcasters. Angela's disappearance from a quiet, lofty street in Gary Village seems impossible. It's different to imagine how a woman, a wife, and a mother can go missing from a suburb in Kansas without a trace, especially in our modern digital world, where Facebook shows you ads based on conversations you've had in the aisles of Target. The moments surrounding Angela's disappearance are not only chilling, but also detective or large speculated issues and the limitations of law enforcement. I knew something was wrong when I found out there wasn't a death certificate. I knew I was in for a long ride. The last time Ellie saw her mother, Angela, was on the evening of June 19, 2019. Ellie had just returned for a 2-month study abroad in Europe, where she walked the ancient cobblestone streets of Peru and posed for photos in the poppy fields of northern Italy. Angela wanted to spend time with Ellie after she had been away for 2 months. Ellie had been Angelique's whole world since the day she was born. Angelique was upset that Ellie wanted to go hang out with friends. As the fight escalated, Angel, I'm calling her A, gathered some of Ellie's stuff and told her to leave. I expect you to come back home later that night after the fight, Ellie says. It was super weird that my mom never reached out to me. My opinion, but I really don't know them personally or know the case personally, so it really is like this is what has been said, so this is what the opinion of other people have been. And I hope y'all understand that I don't mean to disrespect, harm, and I do not suggest to do any of this stuff that people have done. And I hope that this stuff doesn't continue to happen. After her mother kicked her out, Ellie went to stay with her boyfriend and his family in Fairway, and her father, G, texted her to say he wanted her to stay with Brad and Marva Green, his brother and sister-in-law. For days after the fight between Ellie and A, G texted Ellie to tell her that her mother was getting treatment for mental health issues. He had taken her away with mental health people in the parking lot of a store. It was a struggle, he texted. Several minutes later, G texted Ellie and asked her not to tell A's family, the Gussos, about her being admitted for treatment until he knew more about her condition. A had exhibited some odd behavior and absentee behavior in the past, Ellie says, but she was surprised to hear that she was in need of patient care. I knew my mother had acted weird, but kind of weird, but I didn't know it was to the extent to where she needed to be taken away, Ellie says. Now I look back and think she might have had some anxiety. She didn't look like driving on the highway. She liked things to be perfect. Sometimes she drove me off at school and she would be happy, and then she'd pick me up and start yelling at me for something that happened 5 years earlier. Ellie says that her father insisted she waited to visit her mother until her mental health improved. When Ellie asked G where the hospital her mother had been taken to was, he responded vigorously, Ellie says, saying it was somewhere down south. Throughout the summer of 2019, Ellie continued to stay with her boyfriend and his family under the impression that her mother was receiving treatment. Ellie and G continued to communicate, and he visited Ellie, her boyfriend, and his family. They did yard work together, tried to smoke ribs on the 4th of July. For weeks after the fight between Ellie and A, G texted Ellie saying he needed to talk to her. He drove to her boyfriend's home in Freeway to see her. Later that night, on July 6, G had told Ellie that her mother had died of a stroke in the hospital. He didn't tell her which hospital. She also mentioned he didn't want to have a memorial service for A, and that he wanted to wait to tell the Gussos about her death. Ellie respected her father's wishes with the intent of letting him grieve on his own terms. No one really questioned him, Ellie said. I didn't want to ask a ton of questions and I didn't want to ask a ton of questions and offer him while he was grieving. Offended him. I expected to come home later that night after the fight, but it was super weird that my mom never reached out to me. 8 months passed before Ellie called her mother's family, the Gussos, to tell them of A's passing, but it had been drilled into Ellie that it wasn't her place to share the news with her family. In New York, A spoke to her family only a few times a year. On holidays, Chinese New Year, and so it wasn't unusual for the Russos hadn't heard from A for several months, but they were shocked and confused when Ellie called them for the news. Michelle Gu, A's niece, asked her cousin for a death certificate. Michelle, a corporate lawyer in New York, was immediately suspicious. She was also close to A. Michelle grew up in Kansas, and A helped raise Michelle until her family moved away when she was 10 years old. After that, A and her sister, Catherine, grew apart, Michelle says. A basically cut off my whole family once she had Ellie. Michelle says she was obsessed with Ellie, like to a point where it was unhealthy. There's just no way she would have left Ellie. According to Michelle, A was antisocial in general. Even when she was grocery shopping, A would make sure Ellie or G went with her so that she wouldn't have to talk to anyone. Still, Catherine had tried to call A few times after the summer of 2018. There was no answer. Angie would do that sometimes, Michelle says. If she didn't want to talk to someone, then she just wouldn't pick up her phone. The day after calling the Russos, February 14, 2020, and the day of Ellie drove up to Topeka to find Angie's death certificate. The following day, February 15,